judge, or I wouldn't have been a judge doing it for 18 years, and they accepted me. I will tell you, I'm kind of living out, there's one of the few, there aren't a lot of judge jokes, okay? A lot of people know attorney jokes. There are very few judge jokes or something. Probably because people don't like to laugh around judges, I don't know. But one of the things where I started is kind of a, I got my second vaccination about 3 weeks ago, so hopefully I won't make anybody nervous standing up here. I don't think I have any symptoms, so. But I feel pretty comfortable. I hope everyone else does at this point. Anyway, so I'm back, and I'm right now assigned to Walker County, which is fairly new because when I was hired, I was told I'd be doing Austin County and Chambers County. And I'm not doing either one of them anymore. Instead, when I came in, one of the other attorneys had left, and so I had to pick up part of Galveston County. I did some cases in Brazoria County, and I've kind of settled down now into Walker County and Fort Bend County. Will be the counties I'll be dealing with the department, the caseworkers. So that's kind of who I am. The question I get a lot of times is why, after 18 years of being a judge, would I want to go back and be an attorney? It's a good question. And part of that is because really I wanted to do something helpful, something meaningful, sure. And the other part is after 18 years of being a judge, I probably needed to do some penitence for how mean I was to a lot of caseworkers. So I probably need to come back and be on their side for a while since I gave them such grief for the 18 years I was a judge. How many people, by the way, have been associated with CASA for more than 15 years? Anybody? Well, then you would know probably what the original symbol for CASA was, right? It wasn't a guy playing jump rope, right? It wasn't. Does anyone know what it was? And I don't know why they changed it, because the original symbol for CASA was a starfish. And a lot of you know what's symbolic of that because you've heard the Starfish Story. Anyone here not heard the Starfish Story? Everyone's heard the Starfish Story. That's great. Okay. I'm going to tell you the abbreviated version of the Starfish Story. So this little boy and his grandpa are walking along this beachfront, and the little boy is picking up starfish on the shore and throwing them back in the water because they come back to life. They can stay alive if they're back in the water, whereas if they stay out, they dry up and die. So the little boy's picking up these starfish and throwing them in the water. And his grandfather says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm saving the starfish, Grandpa." And his grandfather starts laughing. And he says, "Hey, no, look along the beach here. There's like hundreds and hundreds of starfish. You can't save the starfish." And the little boy looks up at his grandfather. He picks up a starfish and he throws it in the water. And he says, "I saved that one." Okay? And that, to me, is symbolic of CASA, right? We're not going to be able to save all the children in Texas, in Walker County, in Huntsville, but we can save, hopefully, the child we're working with. That's the motivation, okay? And so why they changed from a starfish to this 15 years ago is anybody's guess. People higher on the chain than I am made those kind of decisions. I will tell you that I was working with CASA before I became a judge because the CASA training in Bell County, they would have an annual training and they would invite judges and defense attorneys and parents attorneys ad litems to come in. And we would sit as a panel and we would talk to CASA and CASA would ask us questions. And I represented parents back then before I became a judge, which is probably one reason I became a judge because I had a lot of experience in that area.
Yes.
Anyway, let me go back to the joke. I haven't forgot the joke yet, okay? So here's the joke. Farmer's driving along the road. He sees this little puppy that someone's abandoned on the side of the road, okay? And he picks the puppy up. He feels sorry for it. And the puppy, I'm sorry if I'm making people dizzy by walking around. It's easier. He picks the puppy up, takes it, and the little puppy won't stop yapping. It's yap, 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 yap. So he calls it lawyer because it won't shut up, okay? And he gets it back home, and he's training it up to be a hunting dog. And he trains it and trains it, and he trains it really well, and people start borrowing Lawyer to go on hunting trips with him. All right? And they do this for years, and people love Lawyer, and they ask for him all the time. And so this farmer comes and wants to borrow Lawyer for a hunting trip. He's going on a 2-week hunting trip. Says, I'd like to borrow Lawyer. And the farmer says, I can't do it. I can't do it. He's worthless. And the guy goes, what do you mean he's worthless? He's the best hunting dog I've ever had. And the farmer goes, look, some guys borrowed him for a hunting trip, and they forgot his name. And so they started calling him Judge. And now all he does is sit on his butt and bark at the other dogs. So, after 18 years, there's a theory that really what I'm good for is sitting on my butt and barking at the other dogs. And so I'm going to try to reverse that and show that we can still be good lawyers, given the chance, which is kind of why, another reason I'm back in there. But this week is kind of special for me in Huntsville because I had to come, what day was it? I had to come Monday to look at files, so I drove up from Houston to Huntsville. It's the first time I had been in Huntsville in 41 years, okay? My first job out of law school was here in Huntsville. I worked for staff counsel for inmates right downtown, and I was assigned the Ferguson unit, and we represented inmates from the Ferguson unit. That was our job. We were all assigned different units. And my first jury trial as a lawyer was in Houston. I represented a woman from the Goree unit who they had filed on for termination. And I went to Houston and had this 3-day jury trial, and they terminated her rights. But I met the prosecutor for Harris County. Back then, Harris County had 2 lawyers, and they all worked under Harris County Child Protective Services, and they represented the department throughout Harris County. So from the time of emergency removals through appeals, these 2 lawyers did that. Okay. And anyway, I met the assistant agency attorney for the department, and we had the jury trial. He represented the department. I represent, obviously. And about a month later, he calls me and says, you know, our agency attorney's leaving. I'm becoming agency attorney, and I want you to apply for the job. And so I applied for the job, and I got it. And so I represented Harris County Child Protective Services from May of 1979 until October of 1982, okay? But after I left Huntsville, I never came back. So from May of 79 until this week, I've not seen the city of Huntsville. It's changed a lot. In fact, I tried to find where I used to live, and I got so disoriented, I gave up. I just, after 40 years, they might not even be there, I don't know. But anyway, I'm glad I went to Houston because my wife was an investigator in Houston. And back then, it's probably still way, they had, the investigators were for physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse. Well, she was an investigator for sexual abuse. We met on a jury trial and fell in love, and we got married while she was still a caseworker and I was the attorney. And so it was very fortuitous that I got the job in Houston. Let me say one thing. I was asked before I came here if I had any PowerPoints. And I don't, because I don't really like technology very much. I really don't. And for those of you who are older, hopefully you'll appreciate this more than the younger people, but really PowerPoint was developed in 1987. And by 1991, which is what, 30 years ago, it was extremely popular in schools and colleges, okay? And I'm thinking, what a wonderful invention. Because think how much better our politicians would have been, like, say, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. They were deprived of the benefits of PowerPoint. Think how much better politicians they would have been had someone been able to teach them on PowerPoint. Like the politicians we've had over the last 12 or 16 years. Okay? Seriously. PowerPoint? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's helping somebody. But really, it's like, let's all look at this picture on the screen together and let me read it to you. Right? And I'm saying that because I also taught college at Carleton State from the Waco division, McClellan Community College. I taught for total 2003 till 2015, and my students were really upset I didn't have PowerPoint. And I told them, look, not only am I not good at technology, I don't believe in PowerPoint, so you're going to just have to deal with that. And fortunately, I was able to keep my job there for 12 years. So anyway, let me get to the point. First of all, I really appreciate those of you who are working for CASA or volunteering for CASA. You're doing a wonderful thing. You're doing a wonderful thing. And you know that. I mean, if you're going to volunteer for something, what better is there than helping children and helping families? I mean, I personally, I can't do that because I get too emotionally attached. One reason I couldn't be a foster parent, I get too emotionally attached. I've actually worked for years at a dog rescue, and I got emotionally attached there too. So, you know, probably I need to find something like at a public library where I can go around telling people. That would be a good job for me, okay? Anyway, so I'm back doing Walker County. Hopefully everyone got my name. It's Charles Van Orden. You are free to call me or email me anytime if you have a question. Because although I work for the department, I will certainly be glad to give you a legal perspective on if you have a question with CASA. And again, let me go back. So I was a prosecutor for CPS back in 79 to 82. I then left there because our first son was born and we wanted to be in a small town. We really did. Probably something that had to do with that was we got burglarized 2 times in a month living in the Heights back in the 80s. And my wife said, I don't feel safe here. And my wife, God bless her, being a social worker, said, I want to stay at home with our child. I don't want to put our child in daycare. So I said, good. You know what, we'll struggle a little bit, but we're okay. But she didn't feel safe being at home after our house because it's like they would wait till she left to go to the store with the baby, and then they would break in the back door and took some really good stuff that we had, including the most upsetting for me was my grandfather, my mom's dad, had given me a coin collection, and it was very sentimental, and I was attached to it, but they took it, for whatever it was. And so we decided to move, and I got a job with legal aid in Belton, Texas, which is between Waco and Austin, I-35, if you're not familiar with that area. And because of my experience with the department, back then legal aid represented all the parents in CPS proceedings. That's because the county didn't pay the attorneys back then, like they do now. Back then, legal aid just took all the parents because they felt an obligation to do that. And so I represented all the parents in CPS proceedings in those counties around Belton County because we represented several counties. And I did that until the county attorney, the assistant county attorney who did CPS, was leaving to go to Odessa. And he told his boss, look, you ought to get Van Orden in here because he knows what he's doing. Which was a blessing because I loved that. And so I left legal aid to go work for the Bell County Attorney's Office doing what? CPS cases. And I did that for 8 years, and then I hit 40. And for those of you who haven't hit 40 yet, it's quite a shock. Because then, see, 40, you're at the prime of your life, right? You're at the top of the heap. This is as good as it's going to get. It's all downhill from 40, at least that's what I believe. And so I said, I don't want to be a career prosecutor. I need to go out and hang up my shingle, which I did. And so I was in private practice from 1990 until 2001 when I became a judge. And that's why in that course I became board certified in family law. But I represented parents, I represented kids, I stayed involved with the department. And so when the time came, an associate judge is obviously the difference between an associate judge and a district judge is an associate judge is appointed and district judges are elected. And I could never be elected. I could never be elected. I'm not elected, okay? Because unfortunately I speak my mind too much, okay? And being candid is not what politicians are all about. Politicians are all about figuring out what the polls, want you to do and then saying, that's what I'm going to do. And when the polls shift, that's what I'm going to do, okay? So you can also tell that I don't have a very good sense about politicians either, but that's another story. Right now, my job is to and I will tell you, it's a good time because this week I was called on two emergencies. One we didn't remove, the other we did. It was a baby with meth this week in Huntsville. And so on that day that we removed that child, the department, the investigators had 7 what's called priority 1 intakes that they had to investigate. That means you got to investigate. It's abuse or neglect so serious you need to investigate it within 24 hours. So there's a lot of referrals. We're going to be seeing more cases in court. And we see more cases in court, we need more CASAs. We need more guardian ad litems. And so we really do appreciate y'all. When I say we, I'm talking about the state, the department. Because you are, as you know, as you're told, as the PR says, you are the voice for the child. And they kind of adjusted to me, as difficult as that may have been, in Bell County, because what I told CASA there was, here's what I want to see in your reports. And I know you get trained on your reports, and there's a protocol for your reports. What I wanted to see as judge was this: if you had one thing to tell me as a judge that your child wanted me to know, what would it be? And so they always had a little provision in their reports that said, my child would really want you to know, fill in the blank. And of course that's hard if you have an infant, right? But even then, it's kind of like my voice, is now going to be the child's voice because the child can't tell you anything, right? But for the older kids, it was great. I will tell you just one example where CASA just changed the entire complex of the case. We had 2 adolescents, a boy and a girl, who were in care, and their parents basically kind of abandoned them. But we placed them with an aunt who also, both the adolescent kids and the aunt were kind of mentally challenged. And so we went through the case, we're going through the steps, and at some point the aunt wasn't paying attention and the kids wandered off. They wandered off down to a highway, and somebody picked them up and took them to a town about 15 miles away. And the adolescent girl, she was fairly attractive, and the boy was a nice kid, but the thought of a stranger picking up these kids on the highway and taking them just blew everybody's mind, right? Just made people crazy. And so they were moved from the aunt, put them back into foster care in different foster homes. Came to court, and I was the judge, and the department said we can't put them back with the aunt. The mother's attorney said don't put them back with the aunt. The father's attorney said don't put them back with the aunt. The attorney ad litem said don't put them back with the aunt. And CASA came up and said, you need to talk to these kids. Because at that point, I'm like, what am I supposed to do except not put them back with the aunt? CASA said, you need to come talk to the kids. So I did. I went and talked to them. And both of them were like, please, please, please let us go back to the aunt, okay? Because she loves us. And no one else will ever love us. These aren't like little kids. These aren't like 6 or 7-year-old kids. These were adolescents telling me no one else will ever love us. We sincerely believe that. And so CASA's argument was, don't do it, Judge. Send them back to the aunt. And although I'm not a strong believer, I had 4 kids, I'm not a strong believer in what I call the tail doesn't wag the dog. The tail doesn't wag the dog means, in essence, children don't decide what happens, adults decide what happens. So the expression the tail doesn't wag the dog means responsible adults decide what happens with children, not children. But in this case, I sent them back to the aunt. And it had a wonderful, happy ending. They ended up terminating. She adopted the kids. We had a celebration. The kids were happy, content, bonded, and it was a happy ending. But that would not have happened. That ending would not have happened without CASA. Okay? Now, I'm not going to say your particular experience will be that dramatic. Okay? But you have the power to transform these kids' lives. You really do. Especially if you have a judge that's willing to listen to you. Okay? And I think Judge James is excellent. I have been in front of 7 judges just since January. And I will tell you, she's one of the best. She's one, in my opinion. Because she really cares about what she's doing. And you can tell she cares. And some judges don't. I mean, some judges are reluctant to even handle these kind of cases. They don't like CPS cases. Because there's a lot of pain involved. okay? There's a lot of stress and pressure involved, and they don't like to hear it. And it's kind of like, let's move along, you know? Anyway, so what I do as a lawyer in representing the department is, number one, I get the calls on whether or not we should pick kids up, because they have to, by requirement, discuss it with a lawyer first. And one of the other things I do is I also take referrals from Harris County. You think that with about 22 county attorneys on staff, they would have somebody who could take referrals after 5 p.m. But apparently one of the jobs the regional attorney is, at 5 o'clock, the Harris County attorneys go home, and we get calls from the workers in Harris County saying, we've got an emergency situation. In fact, the reason I was a little bit late, because I got a call on the way here, all right? And it was some kids, the mom had gotten in a fight with her oldest son, and she was charged with injuring her child because she went bananas on him, maybe with good reason. And the father was saying, I'm not taking the kids, and there was no one, because one of the older kids had some severe problems. And so it's like, we need to take him into custody. It's like, we need to do that, because you can't leave him with a mom who just got charged with injury to a child. It doesn't make any sense to me. She really has some anger problems. And so I'm telling not only Walker County, but Harris County, you know, when and if they should pick up kids, and giving them alternatives. A lot of you don't know this end of it, but there's alternatives to removing kids from homes. One of them is you remove a perpetrator. We can enter a protective order removing, if it's like the boyfriend who's abusive, or even, you know, a father who's abusive. We have the power in the department to file a protective order to remove them from the home. Now that means that the parent also has to cooperate with that. She can't sneak them back in at midnight, you know, through the back porch. But assuming they're willing to work with us and get rid of the bad guy in the home, that's one ground we have to not take kids from the home. We also can file petitions to participate in services. So if it's not an emergency situation, we can work with parents, give them the same services we give them in court, but not take the kids away from them. So we have certain alternatives. Anyway, I will tell you that one of the reasons I was really happy to come is because you need to know who the attorney is that's representing the department in Walker County. You need to have a sense of who I am, okay? And if I could say anything in one summation of how it would be to be a good caseworker is, don't always accept the menu that the department gives. And what I'm talking about, you know, we know what the menu is. They need to go to parenting classes, they need individual counseling, we need to have a drug assessment, we need, you know, they need to have a psychological evaluation. Sometimes parents don't need that. And sometimes it's really, in my opinion, kind of a waste of time. It really is. And what am I talking about? If you have a child who someone has really, they're children present, so I'll keep my language GP. Okay.
She's the only one.
I have literally in my career seen kids who are beaten almost to death. Now, what do you teach a parent to not beat your child to death? What kind of instruction do you need that you would take a baby like that and break its arm, give it a subdural hematoma, and leave bruises all over it? Who's going to teach you shouldn't do that? It's silly. I mean, that's, you know, I don't even know. You know, okay, they've rubbed my head in parenting classes for 8 weeks. I'm ready for my kid to be back. No. In fact, it's interesting because the Court of Appeals, and you need to know this because this may happen on your watch, cases where mom and dad are the only ones who can do it, but neither one of us admitting anything. We don't know what happened, you know. There's a serious injury to the child, but we don't know. And they go through the process, every single service and program the department offers in the family service plan, they do it. And at the end of the case, the department says, Judge, we want to terminate. And the judge goes, why? Because we don't think a child should go back into that home if we don't know who did this to the child. And the judges and juries agree with that because it's common sense, guys. You're not going to send this baby back to a home where the baby almost died because the parents had counseling. Who did it? who did it, right? And so those cases go up on appeal. And every single appellate court has said, yes, it was appropriate to terminate them because you're not supposed to send babies back to homes where they get hurt unless you know who did it. And these people, whatever they were, weren't truthful enough to say, I did it, because they're afraid. They go to prison, right? So I understand that, but that doesn't mean you get the baby back. You know, you don't get the baby back. It's like these people who have 7 DWIs, and keep in mind I was a prosecutor, I also did a criminal case for a while. Oh, 7 DWIs, and they'll sit there and look at you and say, I don't have an alcohol problem. What? No, you know, the alcohol problem is, if you want to sit in your room and drink yourself into a coma, that's okay, but you should have learned by now you can't get drunk and get behind the wheel of a car. That's your problem, right? But so what? They send them to AA, and they'll sit there and listen. You know, they'll be very polite. They'll sit through 2 classes a week, 3 classes a week, but if they don't think they have a problem, they're not going to get better. They're not going to get better. Now, this next part will kind of, and I don't mean to sound sanctimonious, guys, and I'm certainly not an evangelical preacher. But if I could sum up one scene in all my years of what I believe really strongly, okay? It's a scene from Fiddler on the Roof. Most of you seen Fiddler on the Roof? A few of you. Probably the same people that heard the Starfish. And Fiddler on the Roof, you know, hopefully you even know the story if you've never seen it, but, you know, it's about Tevye and his 3 daughters, and one daughter has fallen in love with this kind of rebel, and he's been sent off to Siberia, okay? And so Tevye is with his daughter at a train station, and he's saying goodbye to her, okay? And she says to him, Papa, God only knows when I will see you again. And his response was, we will leave it in his hands. Okay? That would sum up how I feel about just about everything. It's in God's hands. You know, we'll do what we can. We'll do the best job we can. But a lot of this stuff is it's God. And I'm sorry if that offends someone. I didn't mean to offend anybody. But you need to understand that's how I look at it, okay, at the core of my being. So, I don't know if that's someone joining us or leaving us, I don't know. But, so let me get back to the point. The point being this, it's not just what the child would want to say to the judge, okay? It is taking a stand one way or the other. And I know it's hard because the department presents such a reasonable, you know, this is what ought to happen. And you kind of look at it and think, yeah, that really sounds like a reasonable plan. And I'm not here to criticize the department because I work for them, okay? I'm not in it but not of it. I believe in what they do, but I think they are abundantly cautious a lot of times where they don't need to be. And when I say, well, I don't need to be, if you take a child like that, baby right there, and you give the parents 1 hour a week of visitation for 6 months, tell me what that does to the child. And if you can't imagine that, let me see a show of hands. How many of you have a pet? A dog, a cat, a bird, a rat? I don't, okay. Now, let's suppose someone said to you, we are taking your pet, but you get to come and spend 1 hour with it every week. Your pet that hopefully you care about, okay, and cherish, 1 hour a week you get to come to an office and pet it, and then if you're really good, you get to come back next week for an hour. What would that do to you? And that's an animal. That's not your human flesh, right? And so the department, and understand, they can't do anything else. They're understaffed. They have been since 1979, that was the complaint. They're understaffed, and because they're understaffed, they have a high turnover. And because they have a high turnover, they're understaffed. It's like this vicious circle, all right? So they can't give more than an hour a week because most of them have 20 to 30 kids on their caseloads. Well, if you're going to spend more than an hour messing with visitation, what else do you have time for? Really, you don't, not much, not much. So what's the point? The point is we've got to be looking seriously at what is it we want parents to show us that they can be safe, right? And most of the time it's simply as simple, okay, if they said to you, I'll pick you because you look like you're paying attention a lot. If they said to you, here's what we want you to do to get your dog back. Do you have a dog or a cat? Okay. To get your dog back home, here's what you'd have to do. And you being a reasonable, mature person, you say, whatever. I will crawl naked through a field to get my dog back. Okay?
She would.
I'm serious, whatever you take. At midnight, over broken glass. Tell me what I have to do to get my kid back. I'll do it. Okay? And we have parents who are that motivated. We have parents who will ride bicycles 5, 6, 10 miles rather than, oh, well, I couldn't find a ride to go to my visitation this week. Wow. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Seriously? You only get an hour a week, you missed it? What in your life is more important than spending that time with your child or with your dog? No. What is? What? Tell me, because I don't know. I don't know. All right? So the point is, there's some parents that are they're on board and they're going to hustle. Please get us, as soon as you can, let's get our kid back. And those are the kind that we need to go to court and say, Judge, we can monitor this situation. And what am I talking about? Well, let's talk about meth, because that's real popular, right? It's probably the most addictive drug out there. Why? Because we don't have to get it from Mexico or Canada or Vietnam. We can make it in our bathtubs. And the crazy thing about that is this. I have to show my license every time I get Claritin because they took away the good stuff they used to put in meth. Because only we can get that good stuff now. And so now they put all kinds of crap in there. Battery acid. I don't even want to think about what they're putting in there. Okay? But it's extremely addictive. And I don't want to tell you all the horror stories just over the last 18 years I had as a judge about what people would do on meth. We had one lady who really, she was in El Paso. And she's driving, she doesn't even know where, but she runs out of gas in Bell County with her 2 kids in the car with her, who are like 2 and 3. And this poor Good Samaritan stops because he sees this lady with kids, and he stops. And he says, how can I help you? She says, well, just can you check on my kids, make sure they're looking okay? As he's going to look at her kids, she gets in his car and takes off. Now, luckily, he still had his cell phone. He called police. They picked her up about 5 minutes later. She's high as a kite. There's meth all over her car with these kids. I mean,